They laugh at you, they doubt you, they underestimate you. And then one day, they get quiet. Not because you got louder, not because you got stronger, but because they finally realized you were never playing the same game. You see, most people fight with noise, arguments, opinions, ego, but you fight with silence, with patience, with calculated moves. And the scariest part, you didn't have to destroy them. You just forced them to admit it. Admit that you were 3 steps ahead. Admit that your discipline outlasted their talent. Admit that while they were reacting, you were orchestrating. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's pure mental warfare. And tonight, I'm going to show you exactly how you've been winning battles they didn't even realize they were fighting. They think silence means you have nothing to say, that you're intimidated, unsure, small, that you don't have the confidence to interrupt, to dominate, to make noise just to prove you exist. Funny, isn't it? In a world addicted to volume, the quiet one is always mistaken for weak. But silence isn't empty. It's loaded. While they're talking, you're studying. While they're reacting, you're calculating. Every word they spill is information. Every emotional outburst is a confession. People reveal themselves when they're trying to be heard. Their insecurities leak through their tone. Their fears hide inside their jokes. Their limits show up in their excuses. And you don't interrupt. You collect. Silence gives you something noise never can: control. When you don't rush to defend yourself, you control the pace. When you don't argue back, you control the tension. When you don't explain your every move, you control the mystery. And mystery makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to guess, to assume, to overthink. Overthinking is where they defeat themselves. They start asking questions you never had to answer. What is he planning? Why isn't she reacting? Does he know something I don't? You see what's happening. You didn't attack. You didn't accuse. You didn't even raise your voice. You just stood there, calm, unbothered. And suddenly they're fighting battles inside their own heads. Silence is patience with teeth. Most people crave validation. They want applause, reassurance, immediate results. So they speak too soon, react too fast, reveal too much. They show their strategy before the game even begins. They let their emotions write checks their discipline can't cash. But when you stay silent, you delay gratification. You resist the urge to prove yourself. You let them underestimate you. You let them think they've figured you out. You let them build a false sense of security. That's not weakness. That's positioning. Because when you finally move, it's precise. Not emotional, not desperate, not loud, just effective. Silence protects your energy. It shields your plans from unnecessary opinions. The moment you announce your goals, the world feels invited to critique them, doubt them, shrink them. But when you move in silence, there's no committee, no distractions, just execution. And execution doesn't need applause. There's another thing about silence that scares people. It forces them to confront themselves. When you don't respond to provocation, they have to sit with their own aggression. When you don't engage in gossip, they're left alone with their own bitterness. When you don't compete for attention, they start questioning why they need it so badly. Your silence becomes a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see in the reflection. They might test you, push you, try to pull a reaction out of you just to feel powerful. Because reaction is proof. Reaction means they can control you. But when you don't give it to them, you break the pattern. You deny them the satisfaction. You deny them access. That's power. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't scream. It doesn't argue in comment sections or prove itself in every room. Real power observes, waits, learns the rhythm of the room before ever stepping into the spotlight. Noise seeks attention. Silence commands it. Think about it. In a tense room, when everyone is talking over each other, who do people eventually look at? The one who hasn't spoken yet, the quiet one, the composed one, the one who seems unaffected, because composure under pressure signals strength. You don't rush to correct misunderstandings. You let time expose the truth. You don't chase recognition. You let results make introductions. You don't fight every insult. You choose which battles deserve your energy. Silence is discipline in its purest form. It's the refusal to let emotions dictate your strategy. It's the refusal to perform for people who haven't earned a front row seat to your ambition. It's the ability to endure being misunderstood without collapsing into self-doubt. And when the moment finally arrives, when your preparation meets opportunity, they'll say it happened overnight. They'll call it luck, timing, coincidence, because they never heard you coming. Emotions are loud. They slam doors, raise voices, send messages you regret 5 minutes later. They feel powerful in the moment, like fire in your veins, like electricity under your skin. Anger makes you feel strong. Fear makes you feel alert. Pride makes you feel untouchable. But feelings are impulsive, and impulsive people are predictable. The world is run by those who can stay calm, while everyone else is burning. Emotional control isn't about being cold. It's about being sovereign. It's about owning your internal world so completely that no one else gets to press the buttons. Because the moment someone can provoke you on command, they own you. The moment they can predict your reaction, they can manipulate your direction. That's not strength. That's programming. Watch how easily people surrender control. A single insult, and they erupt. A little disrespect, and they spiral. A small setback, and they collapse. They hand over their focus, their energy, their peace. All because someone else decided to pull a string. And they call that passion. No, that's weakness dressed up as intensity. True power is staying composed when chaos invites you to dance. It's keeping your voice steady when someone expects you to shout. It's choosing restraint when ego begs you to retaliate. Because retaliation feels good in the moment, but strategy wins in the long run. When you control your emotions, you control your timing. You decide when to respond, how to respond, and whether to respond at all. That pause between stimulus and reaction, that's where power lives. Most people never find it. They react before they think, speak before they analyze, act before they calculate. You don't. You observe the provocation like a scientist studying a reaction. You ask yourself, what do they gain if I explode? You recognize the trap, the bait, the invitation to step down to their level. And you smile, not because it's funny, but because you see the strings, and you refuse to be pulled. Emotional control makes you dangerous because it makes you unreadable. When people can't gauge your anger, your fear, your excitement, they can't anticipate your next move. You become steady, consistent, grounded. And consistency under pressure terrifies those who rely on emotional chaos to feel alive. They'll try harder, push further, escalate the drama because they're desperate to see a crack, a flicker, a sign that you're just like them, reactive, impulsive, fragile. But you don't give them the satisfaction. You understand that emotions are data, not commands. Anger tells you a boundary was crossed. Fear tells you something matters. Disappointment tells you expectations were misplaced. You listen, but you don't obey blindly. You filter emotion through logic. You turn feelings into fuel instead of letting them turn into fire. There's a difference. Anyone can be aggressive. Anyone can lash out. But it takes discipline to stay composed when your pride is challenged. It takes strength to sit with discomfort without trying to numb it through revenge or validation. It takes intelligence to realize that the person who angers you controls you. So you choose something radical. You choose mastery. You breathe before speaking. You think before deciding. You detach before reacting. And in that detachment, you gain clarity. While others are blinded by ego, you see the entire board. You notice alliances shifting. You notice weaknesses exposed. You notice patterns repeating. And because you're calm, you're precise. You don't waste energy proving yourself in emotional battles. You conserve it for meaningful moves. You don't argue to win applause. You act to secure results. You don't need the last word. You need the last laugh. Emotional control doesn't make you less human. It makes you more intentional. It transforms chaos into calculation. It turns provocation into opportunity. It converts pressure into performance. People mistake your calm for indifference. They assume you don't care because you don't explode. They think you're unaffected because you don't dramatize your pain. But what they don't realize is that you feel everything. You just refuse to let feelings drive. You are the driver. And when everyone else is swerving, crashing, overcorrecting, you stay on course. Most people move fast because they're afraid of being left behind. They confuse speed with intelligence. They think the quickest response wins, the loudest reaction dominates, the boldest impulse proves strength. So they jump. They interrupt. They decide before they understand. And in doing so, they expose everything. Observation is quieter, slower, sharper. It doesn't rush into the spotlight. It lingers in the shadows, watching patterns form, watching masks slip, watching cracks appear in carefully constructed facades. Impulse feels powerful. Observation is powerful. When you observe, you gather advantages without announcing that you're playing the game. You notice who seeks validation, who avoids accountability, who folds under pressure, who thrives on chaos. You see alliances before they become obvious. You see insecurity disguised as confidence. You see ambition hidden behind fake humility. And you don't interrupt the performance. Impulsive people reveal their strategies in real time. They argue their plans. They brag about their next move. They defend themselves before anyone even accuses them. They think transparency equals dominance. But all they're doing is handing you a blueprint. You don't need to interrogate. You just let them talk. Silence makes people uncomfortable, and discomfort makes them fill the space. They confess through exaggeration. They confess through defensiveness. They confess through over-explaining. The more patient you are, the more they unravel. Observation is patience sharpened into a blade. You're not passive, you're calculating. You're tracking reactions, not just words. Micro-expressions, shifts in tone, the way someone's confidence flickers when challenged, the way their story changes under pressure, the way they laugh a little too loudly when they're threatened. Details matter. Impulse ignores details. It reacts to surface-level emotion. It swings without aiming. It fights the first enemy it sees, unaware that the real threat is standing quietly behind it. That's why impulsive people burn out. They waste energy on the wrong battles. They chase distractions disguised as opportunities. But when you observe first, you choose your battlefield. You understand timing. You understand leverage. You understand that not every provocation deserves a response, and not every opportunity deserves immediate action. Sometimes the smartest move is waiting, letting others overcommit, letting them make promises they can't keep, letting them underestimate you because you haven't shown your full capacity yet. They mistake your patience for hesitation, and that's the advantage. Observation sharpens intuition. The more you watch, the more you recognize patterns. Human behavior is predictable. Ego repeats itself. Fear repeats itself. Ambition repeats itself. You start seeing the same mistakes in different faces, the same overconfidence before collapse, the same arrogance before exposure. And because you've seen it before, you don't panic. While others react emotionally to surprises, you're rarely surprised. You anticipated the betrayal. You predicted the shift. You calculated the fallout. That calm confidence unsettles people. They can't understand how you're always prepared. It's not magic. You were watching. Observation also protects you from self-sabotage. When you pause before reacting, you evaluate your own emotions. You ask whether your pride is speaking, whether your fear is exaggerating the threat, whether your excitement is blinding you to risk. You don't just observe others, you observe yourself. That's discipline. Impulsive decisions feel heroic in the moment, dramatic, bold, but bold without awareness is reckless. Action without information is gambling, and gambling might win once, but strategy wins repeatedly. You collect information like currency. Every interaction deposits something into your mental account. Strengths, weaknesses, motivations, triggers. When the time comes to act, you're not guessing, you're executing based on evidence. And evidence rarely lies. People who move on impulse chase validation. People who observe chase understanding. Validation fades quickly. Understanding compounds. The more you understand, the less you need to prove. The less you need to react. The less you need to dominate conversations just to feel significant. Because you already know where you stand. In rooms full of noise, you are still. In moments of chaos, you are alert. In confrontations, you are attentive rather than explosive. That composure creates an illusion that you're uninvolved, uninterested, detached. But you're deeply engaged. You're mapping the room, tracking dynamics, measuring influence, identifying the fault lines beneath the surface. And when movement finally becomes necessary, it's not rushed. It's not emotional, it's deliberate. Because while they were busy reacting, you were learning. Underestimation is a gift wrapped in arrogance. People look at you and decide your limits in seconds. Too quiet, too young, too different, too ordinary. They measure you with lazy assumptions and walk away satisfied, convinced they've solved the puzzle before even touching a single piece. Let them. Because the moment someone believes they've figured you out, they stop studying you. And when they stop studying you, they stop preparing for you. That's when the real advantage begins. Most people are desperate to be seen as capable. They overperform, overexplain, overcompensate. They rush to prove intelligence, strength, influence. They fear being underestimated because it bruises the ego. It feels disrespectful. It feels diminishing. But ego is loud. Strategy is quiet. When someone underestimates you, they lower their guard. They speak more freely. They reveal more than they should. They assume you won't catch subtle moves, won't notice shifting alliances, won't recognize manipulation when it happens. They think you're behind the curve. And because they think that, they become careless. Carelessness is where mistakes are born. Underestimation buys you time to develop, time to sharpen, time to move without scrutiny. When expectations are low, pressure is low, and without pressure, you can build in peace. No one is watching closely. No one is analyzing your progress. No one feels threatened enough to interfere. You get to grow in the shadows. There's something beautifully dangerous about being overlooked. You enter rooms without alarms going off. You ask questions without suspicion. You observe without being challenged. And while everyone is busy competing with the obvious threats, you're quietly strengthening your position. They laugh at your ambition. They question your consistency. They assume your silence means incapability. But assumptions are comfortable, and comfort makes people blind. Let them believe the version of you that fits their narrative. Because while they're comfortable, you're calculating. Underestimation also protects you from envy. When people don't see you as competition, they don't attack. They don't sabotage. They don't waste energy trying to outshine you. They focus on louder targets, bigger personalities, obvious rivals. Meanwhile, you refine your skills without interference. And when the moment comes, when the opportunity opens, when the spotlight shifts, you don't scramble. You don't panic. You step forward prepared, not because it happened overnight, but because you were building while they were dismissing. The shock on their faces isn't about your success. It's about their miscalculation. They didn't see it coming because they stopped looking. Underestimation tests your discipline. It forces you to detach from validation, to endure being misunderstood, to tolerate being overlooked without collapsing into self-doubt. That's not easy. It challenges pride. It whispers insecurities. It tempts you to prove yourself prematurely. But premature moves expose strategy. You resist the urge. You stay patient. You remember that proving yourself to people who have already decided your worth is a waste of energy. Instead, you let results speak. You let consistency accumulate. You let your growth compound quietly. Because when people underestimate you, they give you space. And space is powerful. In that space you experiment, you fail privately. You adjust without public scrutiny. You build resilience without critics dissecting every misstep. You learn faster because you're not performing for approval. You're refining for impact. Underestimation becomes insulation. It shields you from unnecessary pressure and inflated expectations. It allows you to surprise rather than disappoint. It turns your rise into a disruption. And disruption shifts power. There's something unsettling about someone who exceeds low expectations. It forces people to question their judgment. It exposes their bias. It reminds them that perception is flawed. And people hate being wrong. But you don't correct them early. You don't hint at what's coming. You don't drop clues to earn partial respect. You let the illusion stand. You let them believe they're ahead. You let them feel superior. Because superiority breeds complacency, and complacency creates openings. While they're relaxed, you're relentless. While they're confident in their assumptions, you're evolving beyond them. While they're certain of your limits, you're redefining them. You don't fight underestimation, you weaponize it. Everyone thinks war is won with force, volume, dominance, bigger weapons, louder voices, stronger threats. They focus on the battlefield they can see, the arguments, the confrontations, the visible clashes of ego. But the real war, it starts in the mind. If you control the mind, the body follows. If you influence perception, reality bends, because people don't act based on truth. They act based on what they believe is true. And belief is fragile, flexible, vulnerable to suggestion. Win the mind, and you never have to fight twice. Most conflicts aren't about strength, they're about certainty. Whoever is more certain controls the tempo. The one who doubts hesitates. The one who hesitates reacts, and the one who reacts is already behind. So you don't just build skill, you build conviction. You walk into rooms with quiet assurance.
Not arrogance.
Not noise, just certainty. You speak as if you've already calculated the outcome. You move as if you've already seen the ending. That calm confidence unsettles people. It makes them question their own footing. Doubt spreads quickly. When someone senses that you are mentally unshaken, their aggression weakens, their tone softens, their arguments lose edge. Because deep down, they're scanning for cracks, looking for hesitation, searching for signs that you're unsure. But you don't give them one. Winning the mind also means understanding psychology, triggers, motivations, fears, pride. You study what drives people, what threatens them, what excites them. Not to manipulate recklessly, but to navigate strategically. When you know what someone values, you know how they'll move. When you know what they fear, you know where they're fragile. Knowledge becomes leverage. You don't attack weaknesses publicly. You store them. You observe patterns. You let people believe they're in control while subtly guiding the direction of conversations. A suggestion here. A pause there. A question that plants doubt. A statement that reframes the narrative. You don't overpower. You influence. Because influence lasts longer than intimidation. Intimidation forces obedience temporarily. Influence reshapes thinking permanently. When you shift someone's perception, you alter their decisions. And altered decisions change outcomes. Suddenly, they're choosing paths you anticipated, taking risks you predicted, avoiding moves you subtly discouraged. They think it's their idea. That's the elegance of mental warfare. No visible scars, no dramatic confrontations, just outcomes aligning quietly with your vision. Winning the mind also means mastering your own. You can't destabilize others if you're internally chaotic, if you're easily offended, easily distracted, easily discouraged. You become predictable. And predictability is weakness. So you discipline your thoughts. You challenge your fears before they grow. You silence negative narratives before they echo too loudly. You train your focus to stay steady under pressure. Because internal chaos reflects externally. When you're mentally stable, your presence alone shifts dynamics. You don't need to dominate conversations. You don't need to assert superiority. People feel your groundedness. They sense your clarity. And clarity in a world of confusion feels powerful. It attracts attention. It commands respect. Mental warfare isn't about cruelty. It's about positioning. It's about understanding that every interaction is psychological before it's physical. Every negotiation is emotional before it's logical. Every confrontation is internal before it's external. So you prepare internally first. You anticipate objections before they're spoken. You rehearse pressure in your mind before it arrives. You visualize outcomes so clearly that when reality unfolds, it feels familiar. Familiarity reduces fear, and reduced fear sharpens performance. Meanwhile, others are improvising under stress. You're executing a script you've already studied. Winning the mind means refusing to be provoked into losing composure. It means recognizing when someone is trying to dominate emotionally rather than logically. It means redirecting tension instead of absorbing it. You don't escalate, you redirect. You don't crumble, you reframe. Reframing is power. When you redefine the narrative, you redefine the battlefield. Suddenly what looked like a setback becomes strategy. What looked like criticism becomes exposure. What looked like defeat becomes repositioning. And the person who controls the narrative controls the perception. Perception drives action. Action drives outcome. So while others are busy fighting for the last word, you're shaping the final thought. While they argue surface level issues, you're influencing underlying beliefs. While they focus on visible clashes, you're shifting invisible foundations. Because once the mind aligns, resistance weakens. You don't corner people with accusations. You don't scream the truth in their faces. You don't force confessions with threats or pressure. That's crude. That's desperate. That's what people do when they don't trust their own strategy. You do something far more unsettling. You let them arrive at the truth themselves. There's a certain elegance in that, a psychological precision. Because when someone believes a realization is their own, they defend it, they own it, they internalize it. But when you shove it down their throat, they resist, even if you're right. So you don't shove, you plant. A question here, a raised eyebrow there, a calm pause after they contradict themselves. You let silence stretch just long enough for discomfort to settle in. You let them hear their own words echo back at them. People hate the sound of their own inconsistency. You don't expose their flaw directly. You guide them toward it. You ask them to explain their reasoning, calmly, patiently. You let them dig deeper into their own logic until the cracks become visible, even to them. And when realization flickers across their face, you don't smile. You don't gloat. You stay neutral, because neutrality feels powerful. It says you already knew. Forcing someone to admit something isn't about humiliation. It's about inevitability. You create conditions where denial becomes exhausting, where excuses collapse under their own weight, where pretending requires more energy than honesty. And when honesty becomes the easier path, They choose it. That's not aggression. That's architecture. You build the structure of the conversation carefully. You don't react emotionally when they deflect. You don't interrupt when they ramble. You let them speak, because the more they speak, the more they reveal. You listen for contradictions, for overcompensation, for subtle admissions hidden inside defensive statements. Then you circle back, calmly. You mentioned earlier that, I thought you said. Help me understand. No accusations, no raised voice, just clarity. Clarity is terrifying to someone who's hiding behind confusion. When you remain composed, it removes their escape routes. They can't label you as emotional. They can't accuse you of attacking. They can't dismiss you as irrational. Your calm becomes a mirror reflecting their instability. And eventually, they see it. That's the moment. The shift in posture. The lowered tone, the slight pause before they respond. That's awareness creeping in. That's ego softening under pressure. That's realization dawning without you ever having to declare victory. You don't celebrate. You observe. Because this isn't about winning arguments. It's about shifting perception. Once someone admits, even subtly, that you were right, something changes internally. They reassess you. They reevaluate their assumptions. They begin to see you differently. Respect often follows realization, but you don't demand it. You allow it to form naturally. You let them sit with the understanding that they misjudged you, that they underestimated you, that they spoke too soon. And because you never attacked them directly, they can't justify resentment. They can only acknowledge. There's power in restraint. Anyone can shout the truth. Anyone can point fingers. But it takes discipline to guide someone toward their own conclusion without losing composure. It requires patience to endure misunderstanding long enough for clarity to surface on its own. Patience feels passive to the impatient, but patience applied strategically is pressure. You create space for reflection. You remove emotional noise. You let logic stand alone. And in that quiet space, excuses start sounding weak, even to the person making them. They begin correcting themselves, adjusting their statements, backtracking without being forced. And when they finally say it, when they admit the oversight, the mistake, the miscalculation, you don't react dramatically, you nod, because the goal was never humiliation. The goal was acknowledgement. When people admit something on their own terms, it reshapes their internal narrative. It shifts their view of you. It shifts their view of themselves. And that shift lingers longer than any argument ever could. You didn't overpower them. You outlasted their denial. You didn't silence them. You let their own words do it. And that's the quietest form of dominance.